Hello, weirdos. Welcome back to my channel. My name's EmmaAbe, and this week, we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of November. I know this is coming out like halfway through December, but it has been really hard for me recently to actually be on time, or somewhat punctual, or not halfway through the month, or almost done with the following month in doing these. I so badly need a haircut. That's okay. I am getting one tomorrow. I'm super excited. So today, I'm actually not sure how many books I read this month. I think it was 14. I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So let's talk about them. Let's cut the crap. So first book, I'm trying to not have my pile of books fall over. So the first book that I finished is Collapse by Jared Diamond. This is How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed. And this one, it's I found kind of interesting. It's hard to really put together my thoughts on this because I started reading this I feel like so long ago. It is very dense. I don't really have much to say about it other than it was good. Jared Diamond is very good at writing things about different countries, or not even different countries, but in an anthropological style. He makes interesting claims. But he kind of outlines 6 points that contribute to why society has failed. Part of those are societal, part of those are environmental. And I thought it was a really, really interesting book if you were wanting to learn about different societies, like the fall of the Mayas, the fall of the Eastern Islanders, but it also takes a look at modern societies and stuff that is happening possibly now, or at least a couple decades ago when this was written. Which I'm not remembering. When was this written? I was almost right with a couple decades ago, because this was written in 2005. So it's slightly outdated, but I think some of those concepts, those 6 points that he still brings up, are pretty interesting. And I enjoyed reading this and finishing this up. So that's the first one. The next one I read is The Other Ever Afters. This is a graphic novel, so I did not have an audiobook when I read this, and so here's a little bit of the art on the inside. But essentially it's a bunch of new fairy tales that are queer in some way, and I actually had a lovely conversation with a bookseller when I decided to pick this up, and he recommended it to me, and it was just, I read it in one sitting in one night, and I think it's originally meant for middle grade, but I just thought it was very delightful and cute for what it is. Some of these stories I wished were a little bit longer, but you know, if you want something kind of gay and for a younger audience, and that does involve fairy tale things, I think that this is a good choice. Continuing on, we have the book World of Wonders. This is by Amy Netsukumata, and I actually had the awesome experience to actually get this signed by the author. The author came to my workplace, to my school, and did a presentation, which was really, really cool. And so I got it signed. And so it was really interesting to hear her talk. And it was just really funny because I'd read her book so recently. I read this book because it's one that my students have to read, I think for poetry or something like that. And I really like memoirs written by poets because they are written so well. This, I thought the art throughout was very pretty. Let me see, this is the art for the whale shark. It was really good. In terms of the actual context of this book, so each little essay in here is based off around an animal, and there's about 50, and she talks about the animal and then also talks about how she connects with that animal. And some of the stories I thought were like, oh, that really made a lot of sense, like the connection between. Some of them I felt like it was a really like strenuous connection, but it's really the author like musing on animals, on nature, on beauty of the nature, and also on her own life and her past and history and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say that like this is a book for me. I don't think I would have picked this up if it wasn't a book that my students had to read. But it was, you know, it was pretty good. I don't want to say it like was very transformative. I know it meant a lot for my students, for some of my students who are really inspired by some of Amy's work, but that person was not me. The next one we have is Elatsoe. This is by Darcy Little Badger, and this, sorry, I thought I had a sticker on the back. This is about a young girl who is trying to figure out why her uncle died, because her uncle, was kind of like marked as like an accident, and she thinks her uncle was actually murdered. And she has the ability to talk to dead things. So she's followed around by her like sweet like dog that died and is a ghost. And I didn't really get all of these wolves until I finished reading it. And I don't want to say it's a sweet story, it's an intense story. There are like supernatural beings in this world, but it's set in like the modern like day. I really liked it. I thought it was really interesting. One of the things that I really like appreciated, and it's just a small thing, like a weird thing that like I picked up on, but there's a moment when they're like in a shopping mall and they see a shirt that has a bunch of binary on it, so ones and zeros, and they use like an app to translate the binary into like an actual like what humans could understand, and it translated to hello world. And I read that and I was like, wow, I don't know anything about the author Darcy Little Badger, but she did enough research to know that that is the message that would be put on a shirt that had binary, because if you're unaware, one of the very first programs that usually people write in a new programming language is the program Hello World, and all that program usually does is just print the message to the screen, Hello World. And anyway, I just thought that that was a like a really nice detail and touch that like I don't know if the average person would know that, and it's just something that I, as someone who is a programmer and teaches computer science, really appreciated, and I just did not expect. And I think this is also like a middle grade or like young adult as well. Yeah, it's very, very interesting, and it just sort of ramps up and towards the end. And yeah, I would recommend this one as well. The next book is another middle grade book, and that is Race to the Sun. This is by Rebecca Braunhouse, and this tells a young story about a young girl who can see monsters. She has to kind of like battle these monsters to eventually save her dad, who is like somewhat kidnapped by them, and she goes off on a journey with one of her best friends and her younger brother, who she feels very protective over, to try and save their father and the world. And yeah, I just thought it was a like fun, heart like warming, heart touching like story, especially in the moments of familial reunion that happen. I don't really want to like spoil much more of it, but one thing we know, that Nijoni, who's the main character, her mother like disappeared, or is presumed dead, and she and her younger brother both dealt with that differently, and so did her father. The reveal of like what happened, I thought was very, very interesting, and I liked that it connected so much to the generational things in Nijoni's family. It's hard to really talk about without talking about specifics and getting into spoiler territory. So hopefully that's enough. Race to the Sun, I thought it was really good. This is actually the second Rebecca Braunhouse book that I've read. I've liked all of them so far. All right, the next book that I finished is I, Rigoberta Menchú. This is by Rigoberta Menchú. This is a memoir this is kind of like told. It was originally like a series of interviews and then was turned into this book. Anyway, and the subtitle is An Indian Woman in Guatemala. So this is about a Native woman in Guatemala and growing up in Guatemala and like dealing with everything that was happening in Guatemala. So Rigoberta Menchú is an activist. She's an indigenous rights activist in Guatemala, and she has done a lot of work, not only in documenting her story, but in order to get rights for more people in Guatemala. I don't really know like how spoilery I can get about this. I mean, it's history, but it starts. One thing I really appreciate about this book is that it kind of walks you through a life, walks you through Rigoberto's life, the way that like an anthropologist was. So it talks about like birth ceremonies and marriage ceremonies and like walks through a lot of that. And it was really interesting to hear Rigoberta talk about not only her experience dealing with like oppression and being a Native, but also like how her culture has changed and adapted to dealing with the massive oppression that her culture and her family and her like people have undergone because of like colonization. And you'd think that this might be set like late, like not recently. A lot of this stuff happens, I forget when, like from the 50s to the 70s. So it's really, really recent history. And I did not like realize that, put those two puzzle pieces together until like most of the way through the book. And yeah, there's some really, really powerful scenes in this that are heartbreaking. To hear the things that happened to her friends, to her family, it's really, really difficult. It's really, really heavy material, but it's a really, really good book. And yeah, this was actually originally recommended to me by the Boston Public Library, and I'm so glad they did, because damn, this is intense. Okay, the next book I don't have a physical copy of, and that is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. Oh my gosh. When I finished this book, I was like, oh my god, I'm making my way through the Grishaverse and I am almost done. Yeah, the Grishaverse is not my favorite fantasy series at all, not even close. That being said, I think this duology, the King of Scars duology, whatever it's called, has been my favorite of the bunch. I think that it is just more mature. It deals with heavier themes. Not that something not being mature, not dealing with heavier things won't like hamper my enjoyment. I just did not vibe, it did not jive with like Alina, I think that's her name, from like the first series. And Six of Crows just like wasn't gripping me. And this, I really think with the Grishaverse series, you can't read this book without reading the other ones. Even though it's like technically a new series, I think you have to at least read Six of Crows before this to understand, kind of to have like those character dynamics. I don't know if you won't have any idea who Matthias is. It's hard to talk about this first book without talking about the second book too, which I also finished in this month. So it's kind of hard for me to remember where the books ended. Yeah, so there's that. That's how I feel about that. And then we have another book. This is Daughter of the Deep by Rick Riordan. This is like the first book that he's written. Well, I don't know if it's the first book that he's written outside of like the Percy Jackson universe, but it's the first one that I've read that has been set outside of the Percy. But this essentially follows a young girl, I do not remember her name, Anna Dakar, and she goes to this school called Harding Pencroft that they all call HP. And it is a school that like is super like focused on like all things nautical, and they have like a bunch of different like houses, and they all specialize in like different things. But she and like everybody in her grade all witness this their school filled with all of their students, all of the students like basically slide into the ocean, and she has to go on a journey to figure out, like, to go find this one place. It's really hard to explain like why they go on this journey without like I don't know if spoiling some things is right, but to try and find other people that could help them basically rebuild the school and also just get a grip on their lives, because you have a bunch of young teenagers that were just kind of like stranded, and Anna turns out to be very, very important in this universe. Another thing to know about this is that this interacts with a lot of like 2,000, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and I don't know quite like how to explain it, but Rick Riordan does similar things with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that he did with the Greek pantheon in Percy Jackson. So I don't know if that helps. But I quite enjoyed this. The reveals of who were doing what, I did not see coming. I thought about putting this down because I don't think the timing was right for me to be reading this, because when I started reading this, my uncle had a heart attack, and hearing a lot of Anna's like thoughts about grieving like her brother, who also went to the school and died in the like attack, was just a lot. But I pushed through it and I finished it, and I actually quite enjoyed it. So there's that. The next book that I finished is Luck in the Shadows. This is by Lynn Feliwig. How to describe this book? I don't know. So you have this like this young man named Alec. He is taken under the wing of, what is his name? Sergel. And Sergel is like a magician, is older than Alec, and Sergel is gay. Alec has yet to come to this realization that he is also gay, and they are, they're traveling together and just puttering around until they get embroiled in like this conspiracy. I believe will be continued on in the next book, which I do have a copy of. I just haven't gotten around to reading it. I really like their interactions. Like by the end of this book, they're sitting still like firmly as companions and friends, because I think that Sergel does not want to take advantage of Alec. Again, Alec has not realized that he is gay. Ooh, sorry. My roommate just like texted me. It was like, are you using the oven? And I was like, no. Oops. Sorry. Anyway, so yeah, people are honking their horn outside. But that's Luck in the Shadows. I really enjoyed it. I have the next book in the series. I'll be excited to continue on. There's like 7, so I don't know what I have done to myself, because I have a lot of books that I in the middle of, and I keep starting new series. What the fuck is wrong with me? There are worse things, right? Please tell me there's worse things. There has to be. That I finished is Children of Ash and Elm. This is a history of the Vikings. This is by Neil Price. This is honestly one of the better written like historical accounts of something that I have read. This was really, really good. I really, really liked this. I really liked how the author like bookends the beginning and the end of the book with like allusions to, not allusions, just straight up like retellings of myths and Viking myths. I thought that really like bookended the book really well, especially since we are going through a history of Vikings. I really, really liked that. I really liked that this book didn't really try and like sugarcoat or pretend that the Vikings were anything other than what they were. And I'm so glad I read this. I've been eyeing this book for a while, and I finished it and I'm happy. And yeah, this really blew me out of the water in terms of how good it was. Yeah, it really doesn't pull any punches, you know. It talks about sexual slavery that the Vikings did. It talks about like mass murders that they did. but it also doesn't pretend that they were anything like worse than what they were, you know, like it doesn't go down the road of completely villainizing the Vikings, and it doesn't go down the road of pretending that the Vikings were like better or morally superior than anyone else. And I quite enjoyed this. I really like this. I would recommend this to anybody who is wanting to learn more about the Vikings. Yeah, it was really good. I don't know what to say. Other than that, the next book that I finished is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. And I go back and forth on like whether or not I really like this or not. For me, this book was very meh. And maybe that's just because I didn't read the stuff on the back, but I have been struggling with horror books that make all of these references and talk about different horror movies, because I don't really like watch horror movies, or I haven't really, so I don't know who half the people that were made reference to in this book were. So you essentially have this young girl by the name of Jade, and she's in high school and she is obsessed with horror, and she watches all of these really weird, really like, well, not weird, they're just horror movies, and I haven't watched any of them, and she has like this horror dynamic, like almost down to a science, and she knows that something really bad is going to happen in her town, and she is like spends a good portion of the book trying to find and or convince the final girl, who's another local girl at her town, which low-key loves the sapphic relationship between the two of them. I think it was the ending that really did it for me. It probably would have been more on like the positive side if like the actual person who was like murdering people was like a real person, or I don't know. It was just a supernatural element that I felt worked more in his story for the only like good Indians for me better than this did. So I think it was well written. It was very interesting. At points I felt like it got a little bit slow, especially like towards the beginning. But yeah, I like the way he writes horror. I just think that I need to read the back of more like horror books before I read them, because if there's a horror book that like will make reference to like a bunch of horror media that currently exists, I don't think that will click with it, and that's how I feel about this. It was a meh. It was just a meh, but it was fun. Okay, next, moving on to another history book that is Covered with Night. This is by Nicole Eustace, and this was a meh history one for me. So we have like two kind of meh ones back to back. So this tells the story about murder and in Indigenous justice in early America, and it talks really about this murder of this young of this Indian man whose name is escaping my brain. Okay, the only name that they had in like the little blurb, Captain Civility, his actual name starts with a fucking S, and it is not, I want to say Susquehannock, but that's not right. I know that's not right. And so my brain is not wanting to cooperate with me today. I'm just gonna have to deal with it. But this one, like I liked the parts that were talking like about the early relations like between like the Haudenosaunee and like the colonists, and dealing with that and learning about like life in like both places and like how they differed. I liked learning about the person named like Captain Civility and all of that, but I think it was too long. I think that was my problem. I felt bogged down in a lot of it, and a lot of it I was just kind of sitting there like, why am I reading this? Like, why are we going on this like weird side tangent about all this other things, and though that just kind of added things that felt like padding to me rather than actually getting down to the like what actually happened, what the crime was, and how it was dealt. Especially like I like understand in the beginning, and I was totally fine with like spending the time to really like build up relations between like colonists and Native Americans and a little bit of the history behind that. But once we got to like the actual like murder, it just, to me, just sort of felt that there was a lot of just unnecessary like side tangents, and that kind of bogged this book down for me. So I think if it was trimmed of a little bit of that fat, especially towards the end, I think it would have worked a lot better for me. There were some parts I really liked, and there were some parts that I was just like, why am I listening to this? Yeah, that's my feelings on that. Oh, another one is that it spends, and just because it says it back here, it says an immersive tale of the killing of a Native American man and its far-reaching implications from early America to today. I felt like it was missing a lot of the implications for today. Like, it promised me that bit in the beginning, and I felt like there was little to no payoff of that. And that was another issue that I had with it. So, yeah. Next book. The next book is the second book in that, like, King of Scars duology by Lee Bardugo. I think this one is called Rule of Wolves. It was fine. It was fine. Except for this Grishaverse by Lee Bardugo has not been my favorite. I thought the whole stuff with the Darkwing in this, I was like, come on, can we have a different villain? Can we have a better villain? Can we have something new? Because that also brought, brought stuff all the way back from, you know, that Shadow and Bone era. And, like, I understand it's all the same universe. Like, why break them up into, like, 3 different series? I liked the bit in the end with actually who gains power. I thought that was interesting. Yeah, I just overall, I was just kind of done with the series and glad it's over, and I never ever want to read another Grisha book first again. I am done. I'm thoroughly done. And I don't know if it's just because I read so many of them relatively quickly because I had to get this done for the Goodreads Choice Awards, because this book did actually win, I think, Young Adult Fantasy. And I mean, good for the Bardugo. Good for you. These books were not for me. One thing that she does is, like, these books are all kind of structured with, like, bobbing around from different perspectives. So you might follow Nikolai's perspective, you'll follow somebody else's perspective, follow somebody, like, another person's perspective. So, like, I like that, but then, like, so you'll have, like, 4 or 5 characters that you're, like, flipping through perspectives on, but then they're just given, like, a random, like, one-off chapter from a different person's perspective, and I'm like, why did we do that? Like, why was that necessary? Didn't like that. I do feel like Nikolai's character is a little bit shifted from what we saw originally, but I don't know, it's like, am I gonna be upset about it? No, because I just really don't care that much. So yeah, sorry. I just oh my gosh, we're at the end. Anyway, the very last book that I read this past month was The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fistfight in Heaven. This is a short story collection written by Sherman Alexie. These like short stories, I think I in general like struggle just a little bit more like with short stories, because having to bop from like different people's perspectives like relatively quickly was a little bit hard for me, and it just is hard in general. That being said, I still liked this. I'm not gonna say it's like my favorite book ever, because it's not, but I totally see why it is meaningful for so many different people. There were a lot of like layers and references to every single story in this, and I really liked that. I thought that was really well masterfully done. There are a lot of things I feel like flew right over my head because I don't live on a reservation. I've never been to a reservation, you know, but stories like these are like really, really important. And for the parts that like I did understand and I was able to pick up on were like really, really impactful and really, really poignant and really well done. Some of my students, the reason I read this is because some of my students did have to read it. I forget for which class for summer reading, and I also read this for the Skoden Readathon, which I read other books in this for, and I don't exactly remember. No, I remember which ones, but I didn't point that out as I went. And this one does not have a audiobook, but so I had to read this with my eyeballs. So yeah, I'm tired. I want to go to bed, or at least just want to lay down and just do some reading. I'm at a point in the year where all I need is candy. I just need some candy. I picked up some biographies. That was a mistake. I should not have picked up biographies. Alright, well, I'm gonna go lie down. Let me know how your reading for November went, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!